WiSP Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello and welcome to the WiSP Sports Desk here on WiSP Sports, our weekly news show. This is Season 1, Episode 6. I'm Chris Stafford, and every week we bring you the latest news in women's sports. My co-host is Nancy Gillen from Inside the Games. She's joining us from London this week. The last 2 weeks she's been out in Russia, in actually East Siberia, following the World Soccer Championships. So we're going to, the Boxing Championships, got soccer on the brain. And Nancy actually is going to be joining me now this week from England. Nancy, are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Well, I was just saying, you're back from East Siberia now, back home in England. How was the finals? Because last week you were getting excited because it was coming to the business end of the boxing championships. But it seems there were an awful lot of appeals coming towards that final week. What was going on there?
So like you said, there was quite a few protests where the boxer that lost disagreed with the fact that they lost and appealed to the decision. And I don't know, maybe if it was because the bouts just meant more. So they obviously, if they were going out, they weren't going to get into. It was a lot in the semi-finals. So if they went out at that stage, they couldn't fight for silver and gold. So I'm presuming maybe because of how much they mattered, maybe there were more protests. But it was all a bit confusing because people that had lost either 5-0 or 4-1 were told that they weren't able to protest, and it was actually only for the bouts that were really close, so people that lost 3-2, so only, if one judge changed their mind, then they would have gone through, which the rule itself to protest is new, and that the fact that you can't protest if you've lost by quite a large margin isn't in the rules at all, so I don't really know where that came from, and quite a few people were angry at that. And then probably the most dramatic happened in the final between Lauren Price she's normally GB boxing, but she was competing under the Welsh flag, and then Nushka Fontin, who is the Olympic silver medalist, and Fontin won, but Price had appealed that, but no one even knew that she'd appealed it until the medal ceremony when Price came out, took her gold medal, but then Fontin didn't even come out to get her silver. So that was really, really dramatic, and there seems to be no kind of transparency. There's no kind of explanation for why the decision has been reversed when it is. So it's all kind of quite controversial, I think, and it's something I think they need to sort out a bit.
Yeah, it sounded like it was really detracting from the competition because there was so much noise about these appeals. You wondered who was right, who was wrong, whether, it was as close as it seemed to be. But you were there keeping an eye on every blow, literally blow by blow. So what were those final bouts like then? And the gold medalists, obviously, that will have made some history too in another Boxing World Championships. What stood out for you and in certainly those last bouts, Nancy?
Well, I think it was quite interesting that Russia won 4 of the gold medals. So they actually topped the medal table, which I thought was interesting because if you look at how they've performed in previous competitions, and the last edition of the World Championships was only last year, they only got 1 bronze, so they didn't even get any gold medals or silver. And now they've come away with 4 gold medals and actually kind of won the event, got named the best team of the event, which is it's a big leap, and I suppose it shows how much home advantage can really help. So I thought that was really interesting, and it'd be good to see how Russia do in boxing at the Olympics next year to see whether they can replicate those performances.
So what did those performances tell you then, not just of Russia, but of the other performances that, obviously this is an indicator of who's going to be going to Tokyo?
Yeah, well, I think it was all the bouts were extremely competitive. There was only, I think, one bout where the winner was really, really clear. So I think it shows that next year at the Olympics, the standard is going to be really, really, really high. And even though, certain people have been named world champions this year, I don't think it is necessarily guaranteed them even a medal at all at Tokyo next year, because it was so competitive that I think, a lot of people will be going to the Olympics thinking they could probably get on the podium.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're probably glad to be back in England, having spent so much time in Russia, both for the men's and the women's world boxing championships. But you're back home, hitting the ground running, and going to an event later on today. So you're going to tell us about that before you leave us. But we've got a lot of other sports to cover this week, and obviously the news has really been about the obviously Simone Biles, I'm thinking, but she was only one of 3 women that really made history this week, wasn't she? It was a fantastic week for women, both in gymnastics and tennis and in marathon running. Did you see those headlines?
Yeah. So we were talking about Biles last week, weren't we? Because she became the most decorated female gymnast of all time. And now she's the most decorated gymnast of all, in terms of world championship medals. She's now the most decorated gymnast at all. So she's got 25 world medals, which is just incredible, really. And obviously her career is nowhere near over, so it suggests she's just going to go on and on and on and keep collecting those medals. But then, also Coco Gauff, who is only 15, which is just absolutely incredible. Yes. So she's won her first Women's Tennis Association, which is like the obviously professional level of tennis. She's won her first title, so she won that in Austria. And the youngest, as you can imagine, the youngest tennis player to do that. So that's really impressive. And again, she's got at least 20 years of her career left. So if all goes well, she's probably going to be, win many more WTA titles there.
Yeah, for sure. And undoubtedly, I mean, they're starting so young. What an impact she's made. She actually caught our attention at Wimbledon, didn't she, this year?
Yeah.
That's when she really, I think, because she was on such a world stage there, we started to pay attention to her. But clearly she's got some form now, taking that title there in Linz, and we'll go on. It's before you know, it's going to be the Australian Open. We'll be in January now. We just rolls into another year so quickly. So it'll be interesting to see actually if she can hold this form as she gets stronger into the Grand Slam tournaments next year. So we'll be watching that with interest. Then it was the Chicago Marathon, and yet again, Kenya's runners exceed, don't they? But this woman is really standing out with breaking records. Yeah,
Brigid Kosgei, she broke the women's world marathon record, and she ran it in 2 hours, 14 minutes and 4 seconds. And the previous record was held by Britain's Paula Radcliffe, who is pretty much known for being one of the best marathon runners. And the thing that record was held, Radcliffe's record was held for 16 years, and I think that marathon that she ran, it was in Finland, I think it was, and it was known for being just the perfect conditions to run a marathon in terms of the weather. It was nothing like what we've just seen in Doha, where it's been incredibly hot. It was kind of quite cold, like a little bit wet, so it was perfect. And that's kind of, obviously Radcliffe is a really good runner, but that's been kind of one of the reasons why she's managed to hold on to it for so long. And now, so now it's been broken by a full 81 seconds, which is pretty
phenomenal.
Incredible, really. Yeah,
it's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah, good for them. So 3 women there really making history. It really is good to see that. Now, going on at the same time now in Doha was the World Beach Games. We've covered that in previous shows, and that's coming to a finale this weekend, isn't it? It all wraps up this weekend, and I believe later today, Nancy, is the final of the soccer. Now that's going to be between GB and Spain, because their captain scored a last-minute screamer yesterday, I believe, to get them into the final there. Obviously, we don't have the result. That's going to be played out later today. There's several other sports being played in the World Beach Games. But generally, what was your impression of these games? And is it that minority sports are getting a world stage? Has it had the coverage that we would expect beyond, obviously, the extensive coverage that Inside the Games has given it with its live blogs?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of my colleagues are out there, and it seems to have gone down quite well with people in the local area. That I know the turnout has been really good, and there's it's been a really good atmosphere. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've seen it elsewhere other than Inside the Games. Like, I don't know necessarily if all the kind of big media outlets in Britain have been covering it. But then I suppose if because GB are in the beach soccer final, if they get gold there, then I imagine there definitely will be some coverage here. That the fact that they've won that tournament, and that is really good, because beach soccer kind of gets nothing whatsoever. So if that gets a little bit of coverage, then I suppose that's good. So I don't know if it's been picked up kind of as much maybe as organisers would hope, but I do think it has been a success. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we'll follow that. It's obviously give us some more results next week on the show, because those finals are being played out this weekend. Now, thinking of soccer, it was the final of the Women's Sports League here in the US last weekend. There's a couple of finals, the semi-finals and the finals to play next week for the league, but the last three games, I was away this weekend at a convention, Nancy, and I had to get back to my hotel room to watch the final games. And I was jumping from one to another. I think I managed to watch three of them. But one that stood out for me was that Tony Presley, who plays for the Orlando Pride, she came on late in the second half. It was always intended that she would, because she's returning from and being treated for breast cancer. And she's had a double mastectomy, and this was her first game. So she ran out on the pitch, and she was given the captain's armband. I thought that was pretty impressive. And there was another woman also that was returning from having a baby 3 months ago. So shout out to them. So it was very, very exciting watching the last of those games, and because in some of the Northern Hemisphere, obviously in England, in Europe, you're playing through the winter. It's too cold to play over here in the winter. So we have to sit it out now, I'm afraid, and watch the rest of the world play soccer. But yeah, that was pretty exciting watching those final games, and having followed, obviously, several of the players were on the national squad now, and they're all going away doing their own thing, maybe going abroad, maybe going overseas to play. But they're also, it seems that almost every one of them has incredible media demands and sponsorship demands on them now. It's really quite extraordinary, the extent to which with popularity, we want this exposure, we want this popularity, which it's wonderful, but it does put a lot of pressure on them. They don't seem to get a break from it.
Yeah, I guess it's something they're going to have to kind of get used to now. Has the new manager for the national team is it the manager of Seattle Reign? I think he's been named as the manager for the national team now. Well,
you've heard something that I haven't, so there's breaking news on the show then. Is that I know he was one of the favourites, and also Laura Harvey from the Utah Royals was on that top of that list, but she already gave us notice that she's going to be returning to Utah Royals next season. So I think she stepped out of that, but I have not heard that. So when did that break?
Maybe it was. I think it was maybe yesterday. I'm a bit confused because obviously I've been travelling, so I'm not time difference. I'm not too sure, but that's what I've seen. So.
Okay. Yeah, so he was favourite. So, we'll follow up. We're going to try and get a bit more information on that for next week's show. Now, World Athletics, that had, of course, happened, the World Championships in Doha before the World Beach Games got there. And there was quite a bit of news came out of that one way or the other, both on and off the track. But out of it, they had a lot of meetings too, didn't they? And they also named the athletes of the year for men and women who've been nominated too. What update do you have on that, Nancy?
Yeah, so they've 11 athletes have been named for female athlete of the year, including Kosgei, who we were just talking about, who broke the marathon record. And then, the majority of people that have been named have topped the podium at the World Championships. And then we've got Katarina Johnson-Thompson, But yeah, what I wanted to mention is that it was quite surprising that Dina Asher-Smith wasn't on the list. It was a very, very strong list of athletes, and you've got people like Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price as well, who obviously won the 100 metres, coming back from having a child and so on. But Asher-Smith won, she won gold in the 200 metres, silver in the 100 metres, and she was the Diamond League winner for the 100 metres as well. So I'm quite surprised that she hasn't been included on that list.
Yeah, no, it is a very strong list, as you say, and they'll be announcing those winners, the awards, live, actually, at their awards presentation later in the year. Now, there's also some news on an update on the transgender female athletes' testosterone levels. That came out, I believe, yesterday, didn't it, that the IAAF now have stated that the transgender female athletes must lower their testosterone levels by half under the new regulations. And so they were at 10 nanomoles, and they're now going to be at 5 nanomoles. So that's a big jump, but that is a requirement now. And they have to have, I think, had that for 12 months continuously, 5 nanomoles per litre continuously for a period of at least 12 months prior to being declared eligible. What do you read into that, and how much do you think that's going to affect female transgenders?
Well, I think it's quite interesting that it's the same. They're bringing it down to the same level as athletes that have DSD, which is the same as Caster Semenya.
Right, that's differences of sexual development. Yeah.
Yeah. So transgender athletes and athletes with DSD now are required to have the same level, which I think there's going to be debates about this, about whether it's fair. There's already a massive debate about kind of transgender athletes in women's sports as it is, but I think what the IAAF have done here, I think they've just tried to make it consistent almost, because I always thought there was a massive kind of there was inconsistency in what they were telling athletes. So Caster Semenya had to have her levels at 5 nanomoles, but say if a transgender athlete came in, hers could be above, which it didn't, in my mind, didn't really make sense. So they've now brought that down to the same. So I think basically they've just tried to kind of bring in some consistency. So it's probably harder for Semenya now, if she wanted to say, oh, it's kind of, maybe that's a bit unfair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about this.
Yeah, it's not going to go away, this conversation, for sure. And we'll be following it here every week on the WiSP Sports Desk. And you can join in the conversation on social media at WiSP Sports. So drop us a line if you prefer to info@wispsports.com. That's another way of reaching us here. But as I said, you can join in the conversation on our social media at WiSP Sports. We also have some news from the IOC, some sports politics news just for a change there, don't you, Nancy?
Yeah, they've appointed Lana Haddad as the Chief Operating Officer. So they've had a kind of reshuffle, and it does seem like they've put quite a lot of women in charge of certain departments. So the Chief Operating Officer is quite a big role, really. It's kind of in charge of everything like human resources, finances, legal stuff, corporate events. So it's kind of in charge of basically a lot of the operations within the organisation. And then also Marie, I'm not quite sure how you say her surname. I think it's Salah, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Not too sure. She's a director now being put in charge of corporate development, brand and sustainability. And yeah, so those two have now been moved into positions of quite a lot of power, really, and in charge of quite a lot of things. So that's good to see within the IOC.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, that is the body. We follow all the news, and of course, you can follow that anything that happens in the world of games, from the Olympic Games right through to World Beach and beyond, all on InsideTheGames.biz. Now, last weekend, everybody was in Kona that was anything to do with triathlon or remotely interested, because it was the World Championships in Hawaii. Happens there every fall season, every autumn, and Germany's Anne Haug earned her first title, both for herself and for her country, and she took that title in 8 hours, 40 minutes and 10 seconds, beating out Britain's Lucy Charles Barclay. So that was quite a ding-dong, because I think Lucy was leading coming out of the water, and then, because there's run, bike, swim, or swim, bike, run, rather. Anything can change, and obviously it's an amazing competition. The endurance of these athletes is extraordinary. Yeah. Australia's Sarah Crowley came in third, and another athlete that I have watched with interest in triathlon is Daniela Riff, who's the Swiss triathlete. She only managed to come 13th this year. Now, she's won the title 5 years for her, so maybe her form is changing, or whether that was a one-off, I don't know. I mean, it's an incredible endurance competition, so maybe we're seeing some new stars there in the sport. But it's a long day for them. That's an 8-hour day, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah, I always think anyone that has those kind of, that combination of swimming, cycling and running is just really hardcore.
Yeah, it's definitely hardcore. Well, there's been some very good news in women's cricket. I don't know if you noticed that, Nancy, while you were travelling, because that broke just this week.
Yeah, the kind of amount of investment going into English cricket to kind of get it more professional, really.
Yeah, and the ECB, the English Cricket Board, has actually invested £20 million, that is pounds sterling, to transform women's cricket, because they're chasing Australia. They've initially announced this 20 million over the next 2 years, which will allow for 40 full-time professionals, domestic contracts, that is, to be handed out, in addition to the existing 21 England women centrally contracted players. And in addition to this, Nancy, the ICC, the International Cricket Council, has promised a further 2.6 million. And then, as you know, the Women's T20 World Cup is going to be played in Australia next year, and they've promised equal prize money. So cricket really is leading the way, isn't it, when it comes to equality in prize money?
Yeah, and I think, especially in England, there was a massive surge of popularity in cricket in general, because we had a pretty exciting summer, really. And I think it's really good that they've announced it at this time as well, because there's a big interest in cricket in the country. And obviously, if we can get our women's system up to the same standard, then I think that's really, really good as well.
Well, that leads us very nicely into our final story this week about the world's richest sportswomen. Now, excuse me, there's no surprises there that Serena Williams tops those charts. I mean, she's as the biggest earner. And it may not be any surprise to most people that 10 out of the 15, in the top 10 rather, and there's only 3 women in the top 15 that are not from tennis.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always kind of viewed tennis as, there still are debates about equal prize money and equal pay, but I do think tennis is one of the sports where you won't really get many comments about kind of whether women play it almost. I always think it's on par. People will be as happy going to see, say, Williams play Osaka as they would seeing Federer play Nadal. So I don't think that is too much of a surprise, no. I see Alex Morgan is also on there.
Yes. The obviously American national on the American national squad, and she also plays for Orlando Pride. Although we haven't seen her out this season, she's I think since the World Cup, she's been repairing a minor injury. I think it was her knee. But so we haven't seen anything of her in the league games since the World Cup. But yes, she's number 12 in the list, and there's a badminton player and a golf player on there. And apart from those 3, the rest are from tennis. And as I said, Serena tops those charts there, earning a whopping £23 million. Well, 23.8 to be precise. And then Naomi Osaka, who of course, the Japanese tennis player, who hopefully is really going to shine in Tokyo next year. She's on a 19,000, that's again pounds sterling. So yeah, all tennis players. So tennis really can't complain.
Well, definitely not at the moment. And I'm sure a lot of sportswomen are quite envious at some of the figures that have been published there.
Yeah. Well, just to put it in perspective, you mentioned Alex Morgan then. Her earnings are £4.7 million again. So yeah, they're all at 4 million. Those below ninth place, from 9th to 15th, they're on 4 million. So that's a big leap from 23 to 4 for almost half of the pack there. But still good news, and people are paying attention to this. I think this is another thing that's important too, don't you? That actually, you know, we're paying attention to what women are, when we're earning, and you know, hopefully it will show those discrepancies to the point where with the prize money that's being increased, like in cricket and rugby and soccer, and the sponsorship deals, there is movement. It's all a good thing. You know, we spend a lot of time complaining about the inequality, but there is some movement. It may be slow, but it is happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's good that there is kind of a discussion taking place about it. And maybe other sports will almost be kind of embarrassed about how dominant that is with tennis, and maybe try and do something about it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I mentioned at the top of the show that you've got an event to go to today in London.
Yes, I'm going to it's kind of a panel discussion about how we can transform women's sport. So it is about kind of coverage in the media, but then it's also going to discuss about you know, what we can do in schools to get more girls involved in sport, and kind of just, you know, a general look at women's sport in total. So it's got some interesting people are going to be there. I think one is Sally Hancock, who was named in 2015 the most influential woman in sport, and then Kelly Simmons, who is the director of women's football at the FA here in England, and Ebony Rainford Brent, who she's a cricketer, and she was the first black woman in England cricket team. So a really interesting panel of people, and be really, you know, good to hear what they think about the state of women's sport in the country at the moment.
Well, maybe you could bring that back to us next week on the show and tell us how that went.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Fantastic. What else is on your agenda then? Where are you off to next, Nancy?
So I'm going to Warsaw in Poland next week. So that's for the European Olympic Committee General Assembly. So that's going to be kind of quite a lot of politics and probably assigning future European games and so on. So that would be good as well to see what kind of decisions are made there.
Yeah, well, we'll bring that, of course, back to the WiSP Sports Desk, if not next week, the following week. So we'll catch up with you next week. Wednesday, 10 a.m., that suits you, doesn't it, Nancy?
Yeah, no, that's good, yeah.
Fantastic. All right, we'll be back next week with more women's sports news from around the world. In the meanwhile, you can follow us on social media, join in the conversation at WiSP Sports, and you can also call into this show. And if you'd like to call in, just let us know who you are and why you would like to chat with us, what news you have from women's sports. You can either share that on social media ahead of the show, or you can drop us a line and say you would like to call in. We'd love to hear from you if you have any women's sports news from anywhere in the world and from any sport. And you can, of course, keep up with Nancy at InsideTheGames.biz. That's where she blogs and brings you all the latest news from around the world. It's fantastic coverage there on InsideTheGames.biz. And you can follow Nancy at, what's your handle, Nancy?
It's Nancy_Gillen.
My co-host, Nancy Gillen, in England this time, and next week, who knows where she will be. I'm Chris Stafford in the US for sure. And as I said, follow us on WiSP Sports and join us again next week here on the WiSP Sports Desk, 10 a.m. Eastern. Goodbye for now.